The next problem is line spacing. Now, some of you probably noticed that the document we were looking at the beginning, there was no pattern to how often the writer used the enter key. Some lines had 3 extra spaces between, some lines came right after the line before it.
Right.
But there is a rule in academic writing, and this is standard for a lot of types of writing, that we should double space.
That's right. And line spacing, it's easier to read, but also it's easier to grade for your professor. When I have students single spacing documents for me, it's very difficult for me to write any notes on their paper and
or put corrections in if there's a mistake.
Right. It gets very frustrating very quickly, and it hurts their grades.
It also hurts my eyes.
Yeah.
A double space means 1 line of writing and 1 line of empty space, and you can also do this when you're writing in a notebook. Just write on 1 line and then leave an empty line.
Right. Now, the important thing to remember is you want to space your writing, double space your writing, not by hitting the enter key twice every time, but rather by setting this in your document settings, or changing this in your document settings. Let's take a look at that.
And once you learn how to change your document settings, we really recommend that you learn how to do that in at least one global standard word processor, one of the Microsoft or Google Documents or the Mac Pages.
Right.
At least one global standard word processor, just in case you're applying to a global company that doesn't use the HANWord programs.
Right, or if you're applying to graduate school in another country or you're abroad, any of those things.
Let's take a look for a second at how to do that in your document settings. Most word processors, somewhere in the commands bar, have something that looks like this.
Right.
And there's an arrow and some lines.
And
if you click on it, you can choose how much space you put between the lines of text in your writing. So I can highlight this. If I change it to 1.5, they move farther apart. Double space is what you want.
Right.
So here we see totally irregular spaces between lines. There's no pattern or rule.
Right. That would be very difficult for me to read.
Yes. And this is what single-spaced writing looks like. The words are so close together, there's no room here for me to put notes or corrections.
Right. Now, you will see this type of spacing a lot of time in like a newspaper, for example.
Yeah.
Oftentimes use single space or almost single space.
Magazines as well, because paper is expensive when you're printing 20,000 or 100,000 copies of something.
Right.
There's some kinds of business writing where you single space also, and some kinds of reports, but when you get into that situation, learn the rules for the writing situation you are in.
Yeah, most of the time if you're submitting an article to an academic journal, they will specify exactly not only spacing, but what type of font, what type of font size, and your spacing size. So always be aware of those rules and make sure you know them in advance.
Yes. Now this is what double spacing looks like. There's a lot more space. It's easier on my eyes, and there's room here for me to fix an error or to add some feedback.
Exactly.
Finally, as we said before, do not use enter keys to start new lines. Use the document settings instead of the enter key, because sometimes if you use double space using the enter key,
right,
when you send it to the printer or when you open it on a new computer, sometimes this happens.
Right.
You come to the end of the line and this happens.
Right, and that can happen even if you're just making even if you're just making edits earlier in the document. If you alter the spacing and you've done spacing using the enter key, it will come out looking very confusing.
Yes, I handed in a paper late when I made this mistake once in my first year of university. And as the deadline approached, I was almost crying with frustration, going line by line, fixing every single one of these.
Yeah, that's the kind of mistake you don't make twice.
No, learn how to use your word processor. And really, you have 4 years of university. This is a really good time to become excellent at using word processors. That's a skill you can advertise when you're looking for a job.